Hello, everybody. Some of you might already know me, but I'm Sian Hansen, the Executive Director of Legatum Institute. And, well, I've just got a confession to make. I am so excited about this lecture. I've been working for about 3 decades now, for about 30 years. And through that journey, particularly in the first couple of decades when I was in investment banking, I always knew there was something slightly missing. I loved my work, and I was flying around the world, and I was meeting fascinating people, but I always knew that there was something missing. And then 5 years ago, I met Sir Anthony Seldon, and he started articulating the idea of human flourishing and values, and how you can teach this to the youth, and how you can make it part of your life. And he talks about community and family, and this suddenly, for me anyway, was a bit of a turning point. And so personally for me, I am delighted he is here tonight. I'm just thrilled. Now, for those of you who don't know the Institute, Legatum Institute is an international think tank. We focus on promoting prosperity. Now, we do this through a number of different programs, but our core theme is about revitalizing capitalism and democracy. We care very much about prosperity beyond just wealth. We talk about well-being. Do have a look at our index, our prosperity index. That's our flagship product, and we're very proud of it. And you are all exceedingly welcome here at the Institute. You're very welcome to get involved, enjoy our programs, come to our events. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Sir Anthony Seldon. He is a renowned headmaster, author of 40 books, very well known throughout the world. And please, in a warmest welcome to our guest speaker.
Well, thank you very much, Sian, for that marvellous introduction. And I needed having you as a parent for 5 years to learn how to pronounce your name as Sian Hansen. And it is a great honour, genuinely, to be here tonight. I normally don't read, but I am reading because this is a very important lecture. And I normally just talk if anyone's heard me before. Generally, people don't come back a second time if they've heard me once, but I generally talk off the top of my head. So it's quite a novel experience having a script. I do want to just praise Legatum, founded to promote values and the importance of good values at the heart of everything we do. This is a conclusion that I have come to in the course of my life, and try to live life myself according to good values and try and promote this amongst young people. So let me begin by talking about Nikki Morgan, the Education Secretary. She is, I think, shaping up to be an impressive Education Secretary. She's batting on the most difficult of wickets. Labour wants to catch her out, so now do the Lib Dems. So it would appear do supporters of Michael Gove within her own party. It's hardly cricket. So do many in the teaching profession, while the commentariat have written her off as, to continue the cricket analogy, a night watchman who will be rapidly bowled out as soon as the action begins again in the morning, i.e. after the election. People thought she'd be a non-entity, promoted because she's a woman, because she's safe, because she's anyone but Michael Gove. But she is beginning to make the weather. She's absolutely right this week to insist, as did her predecessor Michael Gove, that every single child deserves an excellent education, regardless of family background, regardless of where they live or the school they attended. Too many young people are being failed currently in schools, and this position is intolerable and must not continue in our society if it has any claim to be a democracy and to be based on fairness. She's absolutely right, too, about the 5 keys to school success: powerful leadership, top quality teaching, high expectations of rigour, strong discipline and order, and a mastery of the basics of literacy and numeracy. She's right, too, about school structure. State schools that show they're capable of trust deserve maximum independence. The presumption should be that schools and teachers should be trusted, are capable of self-improvement, and that academies and free schools should flourish. Inadequate schools, however, should have new leadership. Working with proven providers, state or independent, is key. So too are teaching schools. Wellington has, for 2 years, headed a teaching school federation with 12 local secondary schools. We're gaining much from it, so I hope are they. Now, I sense you're expecting me to say the word but. I am going to use but only to introduce the word also. Nikki Morgan is right in what she's done, but she could also be stressing other priorities for schools, as she did in the autumn when she talked about character and values. She's done so less this year, perhaps understandably in the pre-election frenzy. The media loathe any talk about character and values. How very odd. I'm going to tell you about a school to begin with that I know best, Wellington College, and I'm going to show that you can have academic success and a breadth of education and good values and character. So when I took over as head in 2006, we came 256th on the Sunday Times table, and 65% of our A-level grades were A or B. Last summer, it was 95%, and we'd leapt from 256 to 21st in the Sunday Times table. No school, we're told, has ever risen that quickly. How did we manage it? Well, by utilising the 5 factors that Nikki Morgan talks about. Leadership first, as at Brighton College. Strong leadership is absolutely key. Nothing, as I see again to my cost, looking at and being a governor of schools, will happen unless you have the right head. Nothing, nothing, nothing. I repeatedly demanded that staff act in line with best professional standards, and that students are worked hard in class and with homework. It wasn't always easy doing that, and it certainly didn't make me popular. Staff learnt the difference between leadership, which is about changing outcomes, and managing, which is about simply smoothing the status quo. It's such an important distinction, leadership and management. My senior team learned to become senior leaders, not just senior managers. The middle managers running the academics and the pastoral side had to learn to become middle leaders, and developing managers to become developing leaders. Many stepped up and enjoyed it, some did not. Second, high quality teaching. Only one thing matters more than this in the classroom: high quality learning. But you'll never have high quality learning without high quality teaching. All teachers need to understand what an outstanding lesson smells like, feels like, looks like, and be passionate to teach to the very best professional standards in each and every lesson, day in, day out. Ofsted guidance about outstanding lessons is quite helpful in achieving this, but it would be so much more beneficial to schools if Ofsted wasn't repeatedly changing its rubric. Ofsted itself needs to learn what outstanding leadership, outstanding management and communication is, which is not about endless new instructions and the latest jumbled thinking. It's also not about fear. Third, high expectations of rigour and excellence. Well, I believe powerfully in expectation theory. We achieve in life what we expect to achieve, as I was saying to the under-14D team this morning who came in at break for tea and donuts. It's amazing expectation theory, totally transformative. Low expectations are the curse still in many schools, and the fault lies squarely with those teachers who do not demand the best of themselves and of their students. It's tragic that half the schools in the country never send students to Oxford and Cambridge. The tonic that preparing students for these two fine, world-class institutions has is immeasurable in sharpening intellects and developing scholarship throughout the school. There's far too little, by the way, said about scholarship in all schools. Every child at Wellington has their own targets, and using Dweck's growth mindset approach, and if you don't know about Carol Dweck, hear her at the Sunday Times Festival of Education at Wellington. Carol Dweck, the growth mindset, is a very important and very unjargony piece of psychology, which works in schools as it does elsewhere. Using that growth mindset approach, we challenge our students to beat their targets that we've set for them in everything, and which they also set for themselves. It's a collaborative approach. Teachers are encouraged also to perform at or above their own expectations. We offer the International Baccalaureate, which is the finest exam system the world has. I regularly tell our students and parents that when I recently visited Westminster Academy, a state school near Paddington, that sixth formers told me that they'd opted for IB rather than A-level precisely because it was the more academically challenging path than mere A-levels. I love that attitude. I love it. Fourth, strong discipline and order. This is the foundation of every single effective school. Nothing can be achieved without it. One of the first things I did at Wellington College was smarten everybody up, have zero tolerance of poor behaviour, disruption, shoddy work, bullying and drugs. Visit Wellington College today and you'll find immensely supportive relationships between students and a shift from good behaviour based on fear of punishment to good behaviour based upon inner motivation. Mill has a lot to say about intrinsic and extrinsic motivators of our behaviour. At Wellington Academy, which we sponsored from 2009, we began with a hands-off attitude, a mistake. In 2013, we took direct control of the school, brought in principal from Wellington College, and I became executive principal. Insisting on excellent behaviour and discipline across the school was one of the first priorities. I was criticised in The Guardian, no less, and elsewhere for being heavy-handed in assemblies with pupils. Guilty as charged. The students were behaving poorly. I told them so, quite forcefully actually. I was tough because I needed to be tough. Just before Christmas, I was standing by the front door seeing them all come in. A student came up to me, a girl in the lower sixth form, and she said, "Sir, we hated you at first, but now we like you, and we like belonging to a school because it's much more orderly here now, and it's much more friendly." So Wellington Academy is coming right. We'll get the results sorted this summer. The corner's been turned. And fifth is the mastery of basic literacy and numeracy. Spot on. Nothing happens without them. So Nicky Morgan's 5-point plan will materially improve state schools. That means that every child will have a better access to a good education. It will mean that our static and indeed declining social mobility in Britain might well be reversed. Interesting Sutton Trust report out today. It will be reversed, our declining social mobility, depending what data you're looking at on social mobility. It certainly is not improving. We'll do far better and more quickly if the new government from May is to enact the 5-point plan, which I described in my Axis lecture last Tuesday at University College, Oxford. 5 points, a quarter of places at top schools, state and independent, reserved for the bottom quartile, would have a massive effect. A third of schools and colleges in poor performing areas like coastal towns being designated as academically specialist schools. Every independent school to federate with state schools. Means testing places at top state schools to squeeze out the middle class stranglehold. And finally, state schools to broaden their vision of education, including, where possible, state boarding. So let me ask you a question. Why do we insist on schooling for all our young people, taking some 500 weeks out of their lives, at a cost to the state of some £750,000 per pupil? What are we hoping to achieve with these 500 weeks? and £75,000. The development of each child's intellectual faculties, including literacy and numeracy, certainly. Imparting of knowledge of science, of language, the history and culture of the nation, certainly. Communication skills in writing, speaking and digitally, certainly. Performing well in international league tables, including PISA, perhaps. But what about the following 10 areas? What about these? How would you list these? Would you regard them as important? Because governments the world over don't. Becoming law-abiding and responsible members of the communities in which they are brought up and the countries to which they belong. Having their inner talents drawn out, nurtured and enhanced in music, drama and across the arts. Learning the difference between right and wrong and developing good values, good character, grit and resilience. Developing leadership skills so each student can learn at the very least to lead themselves. Learning how to become a caring and responsible parent and a caring and loving wife or husband. Having the creativity and entrepreneurship of each child developed so individual talent and the national economy can flourish. What an extraordinary squandering of talent. I was just asked about this point earlier and how you do that, and can you develop creativity and entrepreneurship amongst young people. Let me just give you the example I used earlier, a topical example with the First World War. The government approach where exams, I much prefer not having notes. The government's, and it's not just our government, across the world, obsession with exams says that what you have to do is just learn the dates, or learn the causes, learn the consequences, get the A star, collect your university place. Another model is to say to students, well, this is what Europe looked like in 1914. What might have happened had there been a catalyst, as in a chemistry lab, with these various forces and pressures? How do you think these forces and pressures might have worked themselves through? Turning to battles, you could say, looking at the Battle of Passchendaele, well, the Germans were surrounding Ypres like that, on the higher ground. The British were here. How might you have fought that battle, and what might you have done yourself? And indeed, how might, if you were Haig and Lloyd George meeting in Downing Street in March 1917, how might you have tried to win this war? And then looking at the consequences and the ending of the war, how might the war have ended? How do wars end anyway? What is it that leads to peace breaking out? We talk a great deal about, if indeed it was a peace, we talk a great deal about how wars break out. It's about active learning rather than passive learning. It's about where the child becomes and student becomes a creative, engaged mind involving all kinds of capacities in them, as opposed to just a passive learner and regurgitator. So if we're talking about creative learning, which is one of these 10 points, that would be how I'd do it. Of course, questions, we can talk about others, just all these points. And then another one, where would we rate learning how to become a good employee? Politeness, turning up on time, learning how to work hard, to finish tasks, to be diligent, to be supportive to other workers and bosses, to be appropriately dressed, to be resilient, to be consistent. What about where might we place having scholarly and cultural interests nurtured and developed? What about having opportunity to develop healthy lifestyles and to learn how to play competitive games, learning skills across the range of sporting activities, giving young people lifelong interests in a whole variety of different sports. What about learning about our own mental, emotional, psychological and physical well-beings, learning who we are, how our bodies operate? At the moment, we are born with these bodies and minds, but we don't give young people the rule book, the manual to tell them how to operate their bodies optimally. We don't do that. We just assume that they're going to know, and yet the body is infinitely more precise than and complex than a car or anything else that we do read manuals for. And then what happens is when things go wrong, when there's a crash, when they fall off the edge of the waterfall, everyone rushes round. But by then it's too late. We have to, surely, I would say, help young people learn how to avoid falling off the waterfall. Now, there are 10 different facets, which is beyond the dreams and the minds of many of those bureaucrats and busy politicians who people the education ministries in every country in the world. At present, in Britain, the 7% who attend independent schools benefit greatly from all of those 10 wider facets of schooling, but for those in state school, much more hit and miss. At Wellington, we achieve the results we do and do these broader things. We innovate massively and do these broader things. We develop all these aptitudes and we get the results. So whatever the cost of the breadth of this activity at Wellington, it is not at the cost or the expense of academic success measured by results. Exam success, the holy grail for governments across the world, is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for being an educated human being. This is because human beings are not machines, but flesh and blood, with capacious minds, with complex bodies that require understanding and sympathy, with emotions that require the same, and with souls. Even if we deny the existence of the human soul will not deny us. We are organisms, yet the mechanistic model of the purpose of education beloved by governments fails to rise to the heights and wonders of the organic model that young people across the world cry out for, as do their parents. It is not enough for young people to emerge from a school with a string of A stars and for us to pat ourselves on the back thinking that box has been ticked and it's job done. It's only part of the whole education journey. Families too have a key role in the development of the finished product, and yet our education system pushes families right away. Academic attainment and exam success can never thus be more than a part of the story of the profound moral responsibility of schools to children, to their parents, to society and to the nation. I would argue that schools that make children and their parents believe that exams are all important are cynical and negligent. Worse, they are ignorant. Because as governments so readily say, school provides a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That opportunity is all the more precious when young people come from disadvantaged backgrounds which do not offer the same chances for enrichment as those from more affluent backgrounds. The word of education, as the linguistic root suggests, is to lead out. Schools need to lead or draw out of young people all their talents and aptitudes. We cannot and must not define this task purely in terms of exam success. not the least because a focus on mere exam success often drains the lifeblood out of academic subjects, creating heavy and dull minds. There is the world of difference between teaching English, my wife's subject, and teaching English GCSE. I mean, why on earth read the texts at GCSE and A-level when you can do much better by reading the critical appreciations? It is a complete waste of time, and as we're trying to teach rationality, it is something that really is not to be recommended. And for English, read history, read chemistry, even read maths. Human intelligence is multifaceted. No one has stated this more clearly and eloquently than Howard Gardner of Harvard in his work on multiple intelligences, dating back over 30 years. As a headmaster, I know that what is not led out of young people, what is not nurtured by the age of 16 or 18, may well remain dormant in that person for the rest of their lives. At Wellington, thus, we have adapted Gardner's work into our own bespoke model of 8 aptitudes, made up of that octagon of the logical and linguistic, moral and spiritual, personal and social, creative and physical. I know that you know that Aristotle taught that an emphasis on character grounded on values is essential to education and to the creation of a good society. I know that you know that some of the wisest thinkers in the last 2 millennia, including all the great spiritual figures from the great religious traditions, have placed great stress on the importance of good character. I know that you know that good character is not simply a question of DNA at birth, but can be nurtured by schools, as indeed it can by family and friends. So why then do governments not talk more about the importance of character and values? Is it because they fear a loss of control or focus in the school improvement crusade? Is it because they believe that valuable lesson time will be sacrificed? I will show you, I hope, that these fears can be allayed. I'll argue that an emphasis on good character, values and breadth is not at the expense of academic work. I'll show you that lesson time does not have to be eroded by them. I argue, myself, but my belief, that academic learning will become much profounder with an emphasis on character and breadth. That exam success indeed will be boosted. Indeed, I believe that a focus on character and breadth is more important than exam passes. Why? Because good character strengths are a greater predictor of success in university and success at life than mere school exam passes. Governments of all parties across the world are guilty of spreading an untruth, of popularizing a false dichotomy that schools can either have exam success or offer breadth, but not both. So I'm just going to talk about King Solomon Academy, which is an ARC school, and I'll talk then about a couple of American schools just to give us some precise examples. King Solomon Academy, character education lies at the heart. The distinguishing characteristic is perhaps of this school is perhaps the singular emphasis on high academic aspiration, with the school promising their pupils a place at an academically rigorous university and a successful life if they follow the instructions they're given. The school is clear that excellent exam grades are vital, but so too is character and confidence that make up the students, a high proportion of whom are on free school meals and pupil premiums. From the moment that children enter the school, teachers talk about university and graduation. Class names and year group names reinforce this by using university names as the ultimate destination. Pupils are spoken to about their jobs as learners and as scholars. Careers are regularly discussed. A smart uniform code underlines how well they'll be expected to dress. Corporate identity is thus immensely strong, with most interactions following set routines and behaviours. Working for the greater good is constantly underlined. All pupils learn philosophy for children, really interesting, because that's developing an active thinking as opposed to passive thinking. It's used as a vehicle to help the young people question their lives, themselves, and others critically, and to listen to others and how to manage disagreement. Weekly celebration assemblies reward those who exemplify good school values. Pupils are offered a variety of prestigious positions, including being a school ambassador or a class ambassador or participating in the Learning Council. The school believes that its emphasis on character and values has already made a marked improvement on good behaviour in and outside the class. So, let's now move on to the US charter schools. So I'm going to just mention West Kidlington in Oxfordshire, which has a very strong emphasis on values, which are described as beliefs that shape behaviour. All adults working in the school are regularly asked the question, what values do you expect of everyone at this school, and what do they expect of you? Having good values is seen as utterly essential to any effective learning. The core values at West Kidlington are trust, respect, honesty, perseverance, peace, and, yes, love. Neil Hawke, the long-standing head of the school, until the end of the last century, believes the key to any school becoming one where values underpin its entire structure is to have a strong head who takes stakeholders along with them. He believes that with leadership, any school can make the transition to a values school, but that no one should underestimate the resistance that they will meet. In US, charter schools called KIPP, Knowledge is Power program schools, now pretty well known in this country, enormously successful since the 1990s, not all of them. The tale of their exam success came out of work that David Levin, the co-founder of KIPP, came across, which was why so many who'd graduated well at school failed to complete their university degree courses. He came across the work of Angela Duckworth, a psychologist, who showed that self-control can be a more reliable predictor of student success than their IQ and their exam scores. Enter the appropriately named Paul Tough, whose book How Children Succeed, now pretty well known, has been spreading across the UK. Tough argues that research by economists, psychologists, neuroscientists and educators have all shown that the skills that a student requires to see them successfully through university and beyond has less to do with IQ and more to do with personality traits. Tufts' conclusions are that children who grow up in dysfunctional environments can find it harder to concentrate, but that this can be addressed in these schools with the proper focus on values and character. Angela Duckworth is a very important figure if you want to take one name away from this talk. At Riverdale School, Dominic Randolph, late of Wellington College as a pupil, is a private school just above Manhattan, Ireland, in New York, another to be fascinated by KIPP. He'd learnt about that from KIPP founder David Levin, just mentioned, to probe in his probing of the essence of resilience, and he whittled it down to 7 qualities that make up this: self-control, grit, social intelligence, optimism, curiosity, gratitude. And self-control, grit, zest, social intelligence, optimism, gratitude and curiosity. They then set about at Riverdale making these the cornerstones of his own school. So at Riverdale, there's a character growth card which the students have, and he works particularly with grit, and it's important because it is a school that works. Randolph believes that schools need to redefine the entire concept and measurement of success. Students need to be given feedback not just on whether they solved a mathematical question, but on how well they approached the solving of the problem. We have been too focused, he said, on the ends of education and insufficiently on the means. Well, two principal points come out of all this. Whether character education makes any difference and whether we should have lessons on character education. Let me just look briefly at these. Academic research produced by the Jubilee Centre for Character and Virtues at the University of Birmingham, well worth looking up, the Jubilee Centre, and Professor James Arthur will be known to many of you, I'm sure. Their research does offer conclusive evidence, to me anyway, from research across many countries that shows that character and values education is not only vital in good schools, but that it's also effective in improving academic outcomes. Their website should be consulted by all who want to know more. On the opposite side of this debate are academics and figures like Toby Young, who argue that 70 to 80% of character is predetermined and that character education is thus largely, if not totally, a waste of time for the great majority of students. Can such a determinist and fatalist view, however, be accurate? In my experience of a lifetime in schools, education research can prove pretty much anything you want it to prove. Ditto psychological research, ditto economics research, but we won't go there, etc. For every good teacher I have ever met in state and independent schools, every good teacher knows instinctively that a core part of their job is to develop the good character of their students. Every teacher I have ever rated knows that intuitively. They don't need educational research to tell them it can't be done. Neither do parents, who would laugh at the notion, most of them, that the character of their children is formed before birth and they can make no impact on their children. Carol Dweck's work shows conclusively, to my satisfaction, that brain functioning is malleable and can be developed under the right stimuli. That's all the neuroplasticity stuff. Moral awareness, as well as academic ability, it's argued, can be raised through systematic and repetitive application. This lies at the heart of character education. The second debate is around can curriculum time, should it be given to the building of character? Some exponents of character education, such as James O'Shaughnessy, one time Cameron's policy chief and now setting up a chain of free schools devoted to good character, he believes that character education is so important it should be taught in lessons. Others believe that character building can be done equally well without losing valuable lesson time to specialist classes, by having a determined focus right across the school on the development of good character virtues in each and every single lesson, in English, in history, in geography, in science, by following the example of the teachers. I don't think we need to get hung up on the debate about should it take class time or not. Schools should be free to decide how they want to spend their curriculum time. If they choose to have lessons specifically on character, that's absolutely fine. If not, they should be developing character in other ways. But what I would say is that those involved in schools who deny that the instilling of good character is not a job for them are and must be nihilists. They inhabit a world in which there are no moral certainties, no belief in human progress or goodness, no acceptance of how education is fundamental to human transformation and growth. Accept that philosophy if you like, but if you do, I hope you go nowhere near our schools, nor become parents, nor go within 100 miles of children or adolescents. As philosophers from Aristotle onwards have taught, human beings flourish when they live ethically, and good character can and must be learnt from schools as well as from parents as well as from society. Schools have suffered woefully from the moral vacuum of the last 25 years, with government after government insisting that the only important objective for schools is good exam grades and good Ofsted reports. We are fast creating a rule-governed society where people are incapable of taking moral choices, from distinguishing right from wrong, indeed denying that such a thing as a moral choice and a moral universe exist, and where they act only in accordance with the laws and the fear of punishment from breaking them. We need to be doing far more in schools to develop the inner moral fabric of all our young people so that they have a developed inward sense of the common welfare and seek positively to be good citizens rather than merely law-abiding citizens. The difference is telling. Untold damage has been done because of the failure of our politicians to impart a sense of moral purpose. You do not have to be a rocket scientist or a chief inspector of schools or a secretary of state to know what a good school is like. The atmosphere in them is always the same, the world over. It's orderly. The students treat each other with respect, and their teachers. They and their staff and the staff look smart. The environment, even if in the most miserably poor areas on the planet, the environment is attractive and nicely presented, and the classrooms and classroom activity is orderly and purposeful. In every good school, without exception, there will be a sense of respect for each other, integrity displayed from teachers and students, a kindly atmosphere, a commitment to curiosity, and an emphasis on the reality of hard work. So schools do what governments tell them. At the moment, the overwhelming message is still exams are all that matter. So should schools prioritise character and values and holistic education, or should they promote exam results? Answer, they should prioritise both. Is this a matter for families as well as schools? Answer, it's a matter for both. Does character matter more at primary than at secondary school? Answer, it matters at both. Why then do I say that schools should prioritise character and values above exams? Because if you prioritise exams in the way that governments want us to, little or nothing will happen with character and values. But if you prioritise character and values, exam success will follow, and for the right reasons, and you will have intrinsic learners who want to learn. The students will behave well in class, they will respect their teacher and each other, they will want to learn rather than being made to learn. They'll want to behave rather than being made to behave. They'll probe beneath surface learning to the depths of subjects because they will become more reflective people. Nicky Morgan and Michael Gove before her have been taking schools powerfully in the right direction. I understand and approve of Nicky Morgan's current emphasis on exams and basic literacy and numeracy. If the Conservatives are re-elected, and they might be, and if she is appointed Education Secretary, and she might be, I have every confidence that she will move back to being a front foot player, not just a back foot player, and that she'll score a century before lunch, fired by the vision that I've outlined for you this afternoon.